Our trip through southwestern history now turns to the early influence of Spain at Santa Fe, New Mexico. Santa Fe's colorful central plaza is the heart of the town. It's the focus of the city's exciting cultural cross-currents and the perfect starting point for your exploration. In just a few hours, you can take a walking tour through 300 years of Santa Fe's history, all within a few blocks of this bustling city park. The original name of the city was La Villa Real de la Santa Fe de San Francisco de Asís, the royal town of the Holy Faith of St. Francis. You can see why they changed it to Santa Fe. Your first stop should be this graceful adobe building bordering the plaza. It's the oldest structure in town. In fact, it's the oldest continuously used public building in the entire country. Known as the Palace of the Governors, it was built at the town's founding in 1610, a decade before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. Today, the Governor's Palace is a first-class museum of New Mexico's history. Museum Associate Director Charles Bennett says the building first served as home and office to Spain's colonial governors and officials.
Well, Bill, one of the first things that the Spanish colonists did upon arrival here in the Santa Fe area is put the local Indians to work, doing various and sundry tasks. One of the more important tasks that they had to do was, of course, plow the fields and plant crops right away. They also wove textiles, different type of textiles.
Charles, where did the artifacts in this room actually come from?
Well, actually, Bill, most of the artifacts you see displayed here in this room were excavated in this room from various subsurface excavations that you can see through trapdoors here, including this one over here to my left, which is a storage pit dug by the Pueblo Indians when they occupied the building for 12 years during what we call the Great Pueblo Revolt, 1680 to 1692, when the Indians living in this area rose in revolt and actually expelled the Spanish from what is today New Mexico to El Paso, Texas.
After 13 years in exile, the Spanish reclaimed Santa Fe in a bloodless siege in 1692. These weapons date from the era of cooperation that soon followed as the Pueblo Indians and the Spanish fought side by side against invading Indians from the Great Plains. Also in the museum is a room dressed just as it was when the U.S. territorial governors used it as an office.
In 1878, the President of the United States appointed Lew Wallace, the governor of New Mexico Territory. Lew Wallace was probably one of our more colorful territorial governors. He was appointed in response to widespread lawlessness and corruption here in New Mexico Territory. He even had a few run-ins with Billy the Kid, one of our more infamous outlaws here in New Mexico. But most of his time was spent in a room here in the Palace of the Governors, much like this room that we're standing in, Bill, working on his novel that you've probably heard of, Ben-Hur.
Across the plaza from the Palace of Governors is literally the end of the trail, specifically the Santa Fe Trail. After Mexico declared its independence from Spain in 1821, American merchants opened the first major western trade route from Missouri to Santa Fe. Soon, Santa Fe was a destination for trappers, traders, and settlers of every kind, all tired, dusty, and needing a place to stay. They'd ride up to the end of the trail, and this is what they'd find: La Fonda, Spanish for the inn. Although this building dates only to 1919, there's been an inn on this spot since the town was founded. And with its striking mountain views and distinctive hand-painted furniture, La Fonda is still a fine place to stay almost 400 years later. With its long history, La Fonda has hosted many important people over the centuries, including President James K. Polk, Generals Sherman and Grant, and one man crucial to Santa Fe's history, Archbishop John Baptiste Lamy. To see Lamy's influence in stone and mortar, just walk across the street from La Fonda to the St. Francis Cathedral. The cathedral's French Romanesque architecture stands in clear contrast to the low adobe structures that surround it. Each of the two towers that flank the main church was planned to support a 160-foot steeple, but those plans were never fulfilled. On the north side of the cathedral stands a chapel, which was built especially to house New Mexico's most venerated figure of the Virgin Mary. Known as La Conquistadora, this wooden statue arrived with monks in the early 1600s and has been worshipped on this spot since the Reconquest in 1692. Another powerful sculpture found at St. Francis Cathedral is this likeness of Archbishop Lamy himself. Not only was he the driving force behind this cathedral, but Lamy also oversaw the building of 45 more churches and a handful of parochial schools throughout the territory. Another of the Archbishop's legacies can be seen just 2 blocks from the cathedral. It's the Loretto Chapel, and it has a remarkable story. The construction of the chapel was started in 1873 for the Sisters of Loretto and dedicated to St. Joseph. But when the building was finished, the sisters realized a horrible mistake had been made. The builders had included a wonderful choir loft, but had left out any stairway leading up to it. Carpenters were called in, but none could devise a solution in the limited space. Then one day, as the story goes, an old man with a donkey and a tool chest came to the Mother Superior and asked if he could try. Working with just a hammer, a saw, and a carpenter's T-square, this is what he built. This masterpiece of carpentry was built without a single nail. There is no supporting pole up the middle, and scientists have been unable to identify the wood used. How this could have been done by one old man with primitive tools in the 1870s, no one knows. But more than one believer has suggested that it was St. Joseph himself, in person, who answered the sisters' prayers for access to their loft.